Welcome to the C Note Show. And today we're speaking about how to be in masculine frame without being a robot. Well, we're going to talk about what does masculine frame mean? What does it feel like for a woman when you're being a robot? And how can you tell, or how can you start to discern this? Because here on the C Note Show and here within Great Men Move Mountains, we want to learn to love and lead with mojo like a king, to inspire intimacy and connection and depth with our woman, because she wants safety, inspiration, and sexual leadership. And we're here to avoid mistakes and solve deep problems, not only in relationship, but for ourselves as a man. Concerns around inspiration and direction and purpose, concerns around emotional swings. Spoke with a man this morning that said, even in the past, his wife had to corral the two of them to sit in a certain place when they went out, because she had learned that he would get kind of butt hurt, little boy, egoic pain if she even sat by another man. Okay, so talking about insecurity, lack of confidence within ourselves, lack of masculine frame. And what is masculine frame? We're going to talk about that today. So let's start there, Cynthia. I want to start with that quick story that I just told, that in the past, this man, his stories was that if she didn't do everything to basically cater to his ego, that he would get butthurt about it. That's not even being a robot. That's far away from being a robot. That's just sort of unabashed insecurity or wanting her to validate him continually. Mm-hmm. He's aware of this now, but let's just start there. So what does that feel like for a woman? Maybe when she's even surprised by this, it occurs later on in the relationship, or she feels like it occurs later on. She didn't know right away that this man didn't have masculine frame, that he wanted her to validate him, that he needed his ego stroked. What does that feel like for a woman in relationship when a man's being like that?
Yeah, I mean, the humanness of it, because I can feel that when men are in that place. I can feel that when women are in that place. But I would say a woman in that situation, she can react in a few different ways. If she is very much a people pleaser personality, that kind of incessant need of his will cause her a great deal of anxiety, because she feels how much there is to lose if she doesn't do that well. Another way she might react is to feel almost sickened and claustrophobic of it, because it's almost like his energy is reaching into her, trying to take something. And then, if she tends more toward being she processes emotions through anger, that could fill her almost with this like wave of rage and lack of respect for who the man is, and even subconsciously how she feels she needs to react to that or can't rely on the relationship with that.
So that's a good example of, it depends on the woman where she's at. Her response might be to attempt to please him. Her response may be to shut down. Her response may be anger, depending.
Yeah, and just called to say that sometimes women, I was speaking to a woman this morning, and her big pattern is to get exhausted by always doing for others. She doesn't really know who she is without that, but a lot of time you see women getting exhausted and annoyed because they're trying to take care of other people's emotions, whether they've been asked to or not.
So how are we within that dance of emotions? A question to ask ourselves, right? This is something that I would never have thought about in the past. But if he needs his emotions handled and her habit is to handle emotions, all of a sudden now we're years down the road dealing with each other's childhood stuff, or this enmeshment or this codependence on one another.
Yeah.
Until one of us wakes up, or one of us gets tired of the old pattern.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. So how about if he's being a robot? How is that different? So maybe he's starting to read books. He's been in this work for a couple of months, a handful of months, and he's sort of trying to do everything that he's reading about or seeing in videos. And all of a sudden, the man in front of you, or the man in front of, this woman, with this hypothetical woman that we're talking about here, that you're embodying, what is it like when he all of a sudden is acting differently or strange or more shut down, trying to listen, but his heart's not open. He's more just listening with his brain and trying to just take it in.
Yeah.
But he comes across like a robot. What does that feel like to a woman? What do you see from your point of view?
Yeah, and that makes so much sense in this work. It's almost trying to contain the thought, contain the reaction. Um, Unfortunately, there's a big proponent of the feminine that wants to make an impact, that feels connected through a little bit of receptivity. And she might be trying to push you into your feminine to get that need met. And that's a different situation. But when she feels like you're a robot and there's nothing she can do to really touch into who you are and what you're feeling, it will feel like there's plexiglass between you and her. And it will be very frustrating, really off putting, and actually make her feel very alone.
Hmm. So I'd love for any man here to jump in and ask questions. Raise your hand and Zoom as always, or post into the chat. Come on in. We'd love for you to ask questions. So you said something there. She may want to push him into more feminine expression to get a need met. I don't think she knows what that means necessarily, but it's sort of a habit. What does that look like? How so?
Yeah, so let's say she's giving you feedback, like, I don't know where you're coming from, I can't get through to you. She might think that connection and relationship is equal receptivity, that if she is going to feel connected, that you have to have the same kind of emotional range and dynamics that she does. And that's very different than her getting to feel your frame, that you're present and you really are here in your body, but you're not trying to act in her same emotional wave and be just like her.
Hmm. So I'm picturing what her wanting more drama from her man kind of a thing. She's wanting more sourcing of excitement. That's kind of what I'm feeling into. If he's there and he's grounded and she reads that as a robot, but
Yeah.
he's really open-hearted, and she's inadvertently wanting him to dance like a monkey. Or she's bored in herself somehow and she's wanting entertainment. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I mean, so the way women interact is very much on the same like emotions wavelength. And so she may think that's the only way to really feel loved. And it's not in her best interest. And I think that's what's amazing when women learn what it's like to be in the presence of men like you, who are embodied, who are in their frame. So she feels you, but she gets to be still in the polar opposite of you.
And that's an advanced concept that we certainly teach that one-on-one and in our groups, and love for you guys if you have questions about that. Yeah, Jamil, thanks for raising your hand. Come on in, please.
Hi.
Hey.
Well, in my situation, what I find difficult is not wanting to share anything that sort of any vulnerabilities or perceived weaknesses, because it's like, oh, you need to sort your shit out kind of thing. And it not being met with sort of empathy, really. And it's like, so it's like the stereotype of me wanting to appear strong, but at the same time being able to share. But how much do you really want to know? Do you really want to know? Or is it going to be too much for you to deal with?
Mm.
Yeah, that's a great question. So let me ask this in a different way. Let's bounce off of you, Jamil, in a different way. So certainly we hear men are supposed to be vulnerable and all this. That's what you're inferring. I typed up what masculine frame means to me in 3 points. I actually did a teaching on this on Saturday, a live tribe call on this as well, but I'm doing it differently here today with you guys, with Cynthia. So to me, what is masculine frame? You see yourself as the protagonist within your story. You have a vision, a personal vision of what you want your life to look like, career, day-to-day, hobbies, everything, and relationship too. And you see yourself as a protagonist of that story. So the story is told in the frame of, I did this, I did that, here's my plan, right? The story's not told in, she thinks I'm an asshole, she won't let me do anything, she's withholding sex from me. That's in someone else's frame. That's in her frame. She's the protagonist in that story, the way it's told. So I tell my story as I'm the protagonist. I see myself that I can affect the world. I am effectual in the world. I'm not a victim. The second piece, confidence in your direction and purpose. So how do you grow confidence? We talked about that, but you have some type of confidence in your direction and what you're doing as a man. For example, you know what you want and you say it. That's a sign of having confidence. Not that it always works out, but you know what you want and you go for it, or you say it, or you speak up. And finally, C, you're aware of your emotions and you're able to be in control of your emotions, including knowing when to be lover, knowing when to be king, knowing when to stand up for yourself, to have a boundary in the world, so to speak. So Jamil, where would you say within your picture of, okay, I'm supposed to be vulnerable, but now Jeff is saying masculine frame. I didn't put the word vulnerable in here. I said protagonist of your own story, confidence in your direction, purpose, and aware. Now it takes vulnerability to say what you want. Like I have to be vulnerable to say what I want because the other person may say no. But where do these things match, or where's there a gap there? So there's the gap of perception. She wants you to be vulnerable and share weakness, it sounds like. And what I'm saying,
or yes,
go ahead. Yeah.
or like, you talk about protagonists with personal vision, but if my vision isn't clear, or my purpose, or even I'm struggling with it, or my purpose, am I inspiring confidence in you by sharing my own struggles?
That's a great question. What would you say?
That's such a great wondering. And I really want to recognize that you get to be human, and that there's a natural way between always knowing purpose and then sometimes not always knowing purpose. I think what I feel in men is when they are confident that no matter how they waver, they feel the purpose sometimes and sometimes they're not. When they're confident in their own process and confident that they will always find a resolution, I feel their honesty, their authenticity, and their confidence in that. Versus if you were to share kind of the open, gaping anger or pain of that, I think for the feminine, that can feel pretty overwhelming, and she won't know how to touch into your vision or even trust your vision.
Yeah. How's that come across, Jamil?
Yeah, it makes sense. I mean, everyone has struggles, but as long as you've got a path that you are trying to head along, then I think, that still can inspire confidence, because it's like at least you're doing something about it rather than wallowing in whatever issue that you have.
Yeah, absolutely. So if the pendulum swung one way and you share all of your anxiety with her as if she's your therapist, or your best male friend, oh, this is so painful. If that's one end of the spectrum, is just dumping on her. The other end is don't tell her anything and pretend like everything's fine, like a robot. They're like, no, it's fine. Totally fine. Everything's good. Where you don't share anything. She can't feel anything from you at that point, though. One end, maybe she's drowning, like she needs to save you when you share all your anxiety. She doesn't know what to do with it. And the other end is she can't feel you at all, right? So we're talking about the middle, the interim there, the mid space, the fertile ground of what to do. Yeah. Thanks, Jamil. Appreciate it. We'll bounce off of that again. Aaron, please come on in.
I have a question for Cynthia. So when I was separated, I became overly sensitive to my emotions. So I was feeling everything, right? And I think it goes back to the original topic that you were bringing up. So I had this over emotions coming to me, right? I was hypersensitive, I call it.
Mm-hmm.
And after we returned and the things settled, and I don't know, a year has passed by, everything came back to normal for me in terms of my emotions. I kind of settled down in terms of the hyper emotions went away. And during the time that it happened, it helped me a lot to sense where I was and where she was. I was using it to guide myself intellectually and emotionally. It was like it was always helping me. Now that it's not there, it's making me more difficult to guide myself, right? Emotion. I need to be more cautious, right? Because the overeat hyper emotion is not there. The first question I have is it that women live in more that hyper emotional state? Is it something that's true that I just don't know about it? Is that a real scenario for women? Is it true?
Yeah, that's a perfect question, because initially I will say Yes, like absolutely. Like Patrick had put in the chat kind of a nuanced question about, well, then how do women learn how to feel? And my immediate reaction was they don't need to learn because it is so immediate and constant. I think it gets really confusing watching women because they do learn strategies to like numb themselves out or pretend certain emotions don't exist. But I do think they're in constant, everything they're making meaning because it's attached to some sort of emotion.
So my wife is living her life more like in my hyper emotional state. Is that correct?
That, to me, that makes perfect sense. And you might share details where it's like, oh, maybe she isn't always doing that, but I would say across the board. And I think that's why women can get so angry or resentful. Like, well, you don't understand. You don't get how hard this is for me. And they even throw out that awful phrase, it's all about you, because their whole world is emotions. And if someone else doesn't recognize that, they think it's callous and unfair.
Okay. Now, how do I continue to, because for the first time in my life, probably it helped me, right, to use those emotions to guide myself, right? How now that it's no longer there, and not that I'm a robot, but it's not as high as it was, right? How do I guide myself? I tend to go more into the intellectual part of it.
Well, Aaron, let me ask, how were you utilizing those emotions to guide yourself previously when they were heightened?
So one thing that I remember is that she was having a drama, and I was trying to help, and I could see for the first time how this connection looked like. I could, because of her drama and how she was behaving, I was like, I don't want to connect with this person because I felt that I wanted to disconnect. It was like, I don't want to help you. And for the first time in my life, I was like, okay, this is disconnection, right? I was feeling that because of the drama that was happening. So I could relate to her when she was saying, when the separation happened, about disconnection, right? That was what she was meaning, right? It was like learning a new language that I was not there, right? For me.
So now, do you feel in touch with that learning?
I feel in touch with intellectually with the learning, yes. Because it happened, it was there, it was real, it was present, it's in my memory, right?
So what's different about you now? I'm following you, but what's different about you now than that time you're remembering when you were more in touch with these emotions?
I'm worried that I'm not detecting things as clearly as it was. Mm-hmm. And by not being able to detect, then I'm not guiding myself in the correct path.
Yes. So let me be clear, because I want to be sure we understand what you're talking about. I'm not quite sure yet still. So let's say 6 months ago, is that about the time frame? Okay. So let's say 6 months ago, you walked into the kitchen and you were hyper aware, which you are not now, you're telling me. You were hyper aware then, which helped you what? Cue more into your wife, make you care, make you care more, make you pay attention more, make you actually like motivated to journal and meditate for 20 minutes and stuff, all that stuff. That's what you mean?
Check.
Okay, yes. Okay. And now you kind of don't give a shit because things got what? A little bit better?
No. I'm worried that I'm not able to detect things as quick.
So what's different about you? What's different about you that you aren't journaling for 10 minutes, meditating for 10 minutes, aware when you walk into the kitchen? Because we're talking about you being different than 6 months ago, right?
No, it was not about journaling. More about when the interaction was happening, I was detecting everything, right? Now it's all by memory. I need to go by my intellect, my brain is telling me.
The way you're describing it, it's almost like I knew how to golf and now I don't know how to golf. Like I knew how to swing the golf club, but now I don't know how to swing the golf club. Is it like that? I'm not quite understanding.
Yeah, it was some similar. It was like I knew how to guide myself better. Yes. Like
so golfing.
What's missing?
What's missing between now and then?
I don't know. I don't know. It's in my mind, it's all about settling the relationship settled, I think, or when it became back to normal, and then the hyper emotions went down.
Your
Yeah,
hyper emotions.
yes,
Okay.
my hyper emotions.
So, all right, let me follow you as best I can. And for time, you asked, so I'm not quite sure I understand why you feel that now you're less aware because you're not on, it sounds like you're not on edge as much. You were on
Right.
edge. Okay. You were on edge before. That doesn't sound very fun or grounded or peaceful. Just sounds like on edge. And now you're not on edge. And you somehow see that as a diminishment of your ability to connect with her emotionally or your skills to read her emotionally.
Correct. That's what. Yeah.
Okay.
My skills to read her are not as present, not as available for me to use them.
And I'm wondering why that
The
is,
tools
because
are
it kind of sounds like before you were hyper anxious, so like more focused on her, and now you're more calm, which is good, but you're not hyper focused on her. So you're seeing that as like a bad thing, basically, or it's somehow. Why
yeah.
do you think that's bad?
I need to process twice. Yeah, I need to process twice to read her versus on the emotional side. It was easier to read her.
Okay, let me form a question for Cynthia, and then let's bounce from there. Paul, I see your hands up. Thanks for being patient. So here's my best question based off of Aaron, and then he can guide us, or you can ask him another question. Maybe I'm just daft here. Okay. All right. Things aren't going well. So I'm walking into the kitchen in the morning, and I'm like, "Hi, I'm super focused on you. Hey, good morning," and I'm really paying attention. So I'm seeing everything that you're doing or your facial expressions. Where maybe now I'm like, "Hey, good morning." And I'm not really paying as much attention. And so now if something's wrong, oh, I wasn't paying attention. What does that dynamic feel like to you?
Well, I could very much resonate with, I think sometimes when our heart is raw, we're so present with the rawness that then it's just like, okay, I'm really there with you because this is really raw. And
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I really like how, to me, you're illustrating the amazingness of masculinity, because you're right. There's like an in-between point of I'm not really paying attention versus the raw. And I think when women can feel that you have a touch-in point of how you can be going in your frame, but you also can feel an emotion when you need to, there's a trust they have in you that even if you don't pick up on it immediately, they trust that, oh, his masculine eyes and frame can turn from what he's doing toward me. So she can learn to trust that over time, that you don't always have to be, that you can be like doing your thing. And then, oh, there's something here. And then you turn that kind of eagle vision toward the emotionality and the space between the two of you. Does that hit home at all?
Yes, it's I understood that I need to find a middle ground, I think, between raw and not feeling, or not feeling, but on the other side.
Yeah, this is actually really similar to what we were talking about with Jamil. It's the super raw versus I'm not paying attention at all, I'm a robot. And the short version, and Aaron, you probably heard us talk about this. So the 10-second version is when you walk into a room where your woman is, or she walks into a room where you are, you want to practice the habitual need to reset yourself, the habitual call for you as a man to reset yourself and to be in lover energy if need be, or to be aware of her for a second or 10 seconds. So it's, if I'm walking into the kitchen and I'm just ignoring her because I've got taxes on my mind, and, you know, my kid just called me an asshole 5 minutes ago, and I'm bringing all that weight around my woman, she doesn't feel like I'm open to her. She feels like I'm, you know, dumping on her with my stuff. But if I come in and I'm all worried about things, that's like hummingbird, that's pressure, that's needy. But the middle ground is I'm walking into the kitchen, I reset myself, and then I say, hey, good morning. And I put all the other things to the side while I'm in the moment with my woman, because I'm her lover. That's part of the middle ground. Yeah. So good stuff, Aaron. Yeah, please, if you have other questions, write them down. I appreciate it. Good stuff. Yeah, Paul, come on in. Thanks for being patient. Thanks, Aaron. That was really good.
Cynthia, you said something just a little bit ago about your wife reacting with a specific phrase, which I've heard a lot in my relationship, and that is, it's always about you.
Oh.
And so I'm hoping to dive into that a little bit because, you know, I'm at a point now where I think the way that I either approach her or the way that I respond is much different than what I used to do. And it's the difference of being timid or maybe even not afraid, but intimidated by her or what her potential reaction may be if I'm truly vulnerable or authentic. So, you know, the practice that I have now is to just kind of state my mind, but do it in a loving or endearing way. But to speak my truth nonetheless. And it's hard to get a read on her. She's a tough nut to crack, even as long as I've known her. But the feeling that I get sometimes, because she won't really talk to me when I open up to her about certain things and I say, hey, this is the direction I see us going, or this is the direction I want us to go. She tends to shut down. And it's exceedingly rare that we can ever have a conversation in that space. But my read on her body language and just knowing her is that she's either, you know, scared, or it's off-putting to her, or maybe she feels like I'm just kind of vomiting. I don't know. It's hard to say for sure. But the response that I sometimes get when she gets really frustrated with whatever it is I'm trying to communicate is, well, it's always about you, isn't it? Which hurts because I care about her, I love her, and I want the best for her. And I believe she knows that that's true, but it's like her telling me, well, you don't see me. Well, I kind of feel the same way, which is why when I tell her these things that I do, and she's not really receptive to it, she doesn't seem to appreciate it. I mean, hell, I don't even think she likes it some of the time. Well, I'm a human being too. I tend to feel the same way. Well, you don't really see me either, even though I'm opening up and I'm kind of putting my heart on the line with some of this stuff. And I don't want to say that she tramples on it, but you know, she could be a little bit more sensitive to what I'm going through and what I tend to express to her. I think I've gotten better at not showing how it hurts if it does, or being afraid of the potential rejection. So that's been my growth, but it is still a problem or an issue. So that's what I've experienced in my world.
Yeah. So thank you, Paul. Do you have a question for Cynthia from there, or where does that take you? Where's the edge then?
Well, yeah, because when she tells me, well, it's all about you, I immediately want to get defensive. I immediately feel the need to explain. You know, it's off-putting to me that she says that kind of a thing to me. So I guess the question is, how do you, because we're talking about masculine frame, right? How do you maintain that and stay grounded when she says that? And what I think she's implying is, well, you certainly don't get me. You certainly don't understand me. You don't appreciate what I'm going through, but I'm the one I'm the one being vulnerable with her, right? I'm the one that's trying to open her up, and she just doesn't want to have it. And instead she puts it back on me. So I wonder what your thought, Cynthia, is from the female perspective. And then perhaps either you or Jeff can comment on the other side of it, which is the masculine side of it.
Yeah. What are your initial impressions, please?
Yeah. So if we're talking about frame today, I think even just awareness that women have a very common thought process, that it's as they're learning about the truth and honesty and the honor of masculinity, as they're learning that, they can really have that thought, well, it's all about them. So even just knowing that that's a default mechanism and it doesn't mean anything about you, and it's something she has to learn through. I just wanted to offer that. The second, wondering, I mean, it sounds like there's parts of her that want to be seen and known, and it doesn't sound like she has skill of really seeing others as well as you might want her to. Do you have a sense of what she wants to be known in her or seen in her when you're putting out your frame, putting out your, hey, this is my vision, this is where I want to go?
How she
I
wants
do.
her identity.
Yeah, it's pretty clear to me. I think, and I think I've said this before to you guys, but she's she's been struggling for a long time. I mean, I can remember back to points in time where we were still dating, which was a long time ago, you know, where she would make comments to me like, I don't have any friends. No one ever calls me. If I don't reach out to them, I never hear from these, you know, alleged friends. So I think she feels very lonely and deserted in her personal life in that particular context. And I do know that to be kind of true. She doesn't ever seem to get phone calls. She doesn't really have any girlfriends that she chats with, you know, kind of stereotypical chatter, you know, between women on the phone or something like that. And so I do kind of know that to be true. And then with regard to, you know, physical intimacy, which is a big issue for us, you know, it's her body image and how she was raised by her mom and all the crap that her mom put in her head about just being superficial and beautiful and, you know, all that crap. So those are two examples, I think, where maybe she doesn't feel like I know her well enough to know that about her. But when I really think about it, you know, I mean, I am supportive. I am supportive in that regard. I offer her the space to open to me. I offer her the opportunity to talk through solutions or ideas. And when she's open to that, it usually gets us somewhere. I think she feels better in those situations. But there are a fair amount of times where, you know, I'll be explaining to her or telling her what vision I have, where I see things going, and perhaps where they're not right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's the trigger for her, is when I suggest that I'm not really living the life that I want with you. And I don't say that directly, but that's really what I'm saying. I think indirectly when I say I have a vision for our future and here's what it is, which I think automatically implies that we're not on that path.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that's the triggering event for her. But I think what it comes back to are these things I've mentioned, where her person, she's just not happy. And she'll tell me it has nothing to do with you. That's the other thing I hear. It has nothing to do with you. It's me. And oh, by the way, it's always about you.
Mm-hmm.
So that's the best description I can give.
That makes a lot of sense. And I've heard you talk before about what she's going through. And I can just feel such warmth and respect that you still bring the vision and the frame to the table. I can feel into her if she's so unhappy and you're like, we're going this way, how she feels. She'll like assume that it's, you know, you're being selfish, and that's like a reflection of her. I'm curious if there's ever moments where you feel you can say to her, hey, I know this is really feels hard right now. I know, you know, this vision I'm putting out there, you could feel like there might be some discomfort with that.
It's not a statement. I think maybe where I'm going wrong is I frame it as a question. So instead of trying to maybe comfort her, I'll ask her, well, isn't that where you want us to go? Don't you see us going in that direction? Because I'm curious. I have doubts in my mind that she wants the same things I do. And so this is me hunting for security or certainty in the relationship. And she really isn't open to having those conversations, or perhaps she'll tell me yes, but the feeling I get from her and what I'm basing my conclusion on is how she's actually responding, not what she says. Right? Actions speak louder than words. And so I have this deep-seated sense that she's not being truthful with me. She's saying one thing, but she's acting in a way that's completely different. And it leaves me guessing, and I feel unsettled by that.
Yeah. So let me jump in and then I'd love for you to come in again. So there's many layers here, of course. We talked before, Paul, with initially what you're saying. So, and certainly welcome for you to jump in. When a woman's depressed and it feels like everything is shit, they won't have a positive vision of anything. So if you say, don't you want that for our life too? And she's depressed and in 20 feet of, you know, quicksand and feels like she's drowning, she's not going to have any ability to see any kind of positive future, period. Like that's a person that's deeply depressed, any person. So if you're like, hey, we're going to have this great future, and you see on her body language that she doesn't believe you, or she doesn't even believe it's possible, you might be reading that as she doesn't want the same thing as you, even though she's like just depressed. That's a big deal, but that's a piece of this. Okay. Then the other part, so I'm going to be a little confrontational. Not that you guys ever see me be confrontational. I'm going to be a little confrontational, but when like you've been working on this for a long time, you're a man of heart. Sure, we all fuck up, but it's absolutely not just about you, Paul. And you know that to your soul. Like you know that to your soul. This is a part of masculine frame, what I'm explaining here. So to my soul, to your soul, you know you are a man that cares for her. You want positive future together. You know to your soul it's not all about you. So she's actually testing your frame by jabbing you. And this is something we've all learned, right? Women are our intimate partners so good at finding the chink in our armor and just slipping that knife right in there to see how we respond. And it's a human instinct to try to pull someone else down to the feeling that we're feeling. Like if I'm depressed, the instinct is to pull other people down. It's just a natural human thing. So she's like finding that, and that's a challenge women give us. So she's testing your frame, saying something that's really hurtful that you know isn't true. So how do you handle that now? And when I say confrontational, how you handle that, I would, if I'm in your spot, I would say, because this is where it gets real messy. Okay. Because she could be like, you're gaslighting me. I could say, that's absolutely not true. What I want is amazing things for both of us. Stop gaslighting me and telling me I'm crazy. Okay. It's really easy for someone to sit across from you and just shit on everything that you say. Like you're an attorney. Fuck. I'm preaching to the choir. Okay. So it's real easy. I could just sit over here and just shit on everything that you say. Like, and it doesn't need to make any logical sense because I don't need it to make logical sense. I can just emotionally attack you, whatever, or just, that's wrong. The earth is flat. You're wrong. Stop trying to gaslight me. The earth is flat. Knock it off. You're being aggressive. You're being abusive now. You're being abusive. Everyone in my family thinks you're abusive. I just like throw all kind of shit that's not necessarily true. So where I'm saying confrontational is, and we did this as a career in the school system, which is there's some people, some children, some adults that aren't in a place to really save themselves. And they sometimes don't even want that. And so if a person is depressed or like so bad off that they really need someone to help them, it's not about, it's kind of, that takes precedence over me trying to connect in an intimate way. But if she's like so depressed, or let's say she's an alcoholic, we've had this client before. She drinks like all day, every day, like blackout, plowed alcoholism, and she's not getting help for herself. Well, you're not going to go and try to like have an emotional connection with someone who's trash, drunk, or blacked out or hungover. It's not the same, but it's like if someone's depressed or really they need help, it goes something like this. This isn't working. You need help, and I'm going to take you for help. Like that's how, if someone's, off the deep end, needs help, they're not going to be able to connect with you emotionally. Now, that may not be your wife, but okay. But it's all about you. No, it's not all about me. What it's about right now is I'm talking about us, our relationship. And I'd love for you to join me in this conversation. She's probably just going to shut down. Like, hey, that's okay. We'll try this again later. And I would try it again the next day. And if she's depressed, I would get her to a doctor. If she's an alcoholic, I would get her to a rehab center. Like there's a point where, or if she like blows every dollar that you ever have, if she's terrible at managing money, then it's like, hey, you suck at managing money. Let's teach you. You got to help someone who's not able to help themselves necessarily. Go ahead.
So that's not fixing her then.
Well, this is why I said this is confrontational, because we've talked quite a bit. If someone won't participate in their own rescue, either they need to be rescued, whether they like it or not, or I don't want that person in my life. Like, right. Ultimately, that's a choice that we have to make.
Right. And that's my concern, man, is that, I'm growing and she's really not. If anything, she may be backpedaling, or she's just completely stagnant. She keeps telling me, it's not about you. It's not about you. Okay, well, that's fine. But when does that change? If it is truly her, I can't ask her that, or at least I don't think I can. I think that's the wrong question to ask. But that's what's looming in my mind. Well, if you're being honest with me and it is really you, I'm not just going to sit around and wait in perpetuity for you to change. At some point, I'm going to outgrow that. And so that's the balance I'm trying to find. Do I fix her, quote unquote, and get her the help that I really think that she needs and really push that to the point that she's completely uncomfortable with it? Or do I just kind of let her figure it out? And if she doesn't, then perhaps at some point, 5 years from now, whatever the hell it's going to be, I just say, all right, look, it's not working.
That's a good question. We don't have a solid magic answer for you here, of course. But let me ask Cynthia that inferred question, and then we'll close it out for today. So should a man just like let her handle her own shit? Data talks about this a lot. Mm-hmm. What do you believe? What's your professional opinion on I should just let her handle her shit?
Yeah. I mean, my gut response is no. because in this situation, I feel a woman that's deep in the water. And, I know as a woman, like in your mind, you're trying to pull your own masculine anchors. Like, I can figure it out. Like the next day, if I just do this, if I do that. But if the emotionality is so big and so swaying, and there's so many triggers going on with her, it's next to impossible. And this kind of ties into this whole comment that women like to wield, like it's all about you. Underneath that is a very instinctual knowing and need for them to be seen and understood, and to be seen and understood in their experience. And that's where true healing comes. And sometimes she won't allow that to happen in relationships. Sometimes it's so deep that even just the common, like, hey, I see this is really hard for you, is not enough. So it's almost like pulling her out of the water and getting her to a place where she's really going to feel witnessed in whatever her pain is. Because without that, she will always be the victim. She'll never resolve this. And ultimately, she'll always blame herself or always blame you that she couldn't find solid ground.
So would you recommend any particular course of action? Or, I mean, that as a man, we want to save if we need to. Like if the house is on fire, we're going to run into the house. But if it's not on fire, then I shouldn't be running into the house. That's the question. So is there, with all your work with women and trauma and such, is there a particular delineation? You don't have to make, if you don't want to say, that's fine, right? But is there a delineation of she needs like medical help potentially?
Yeah, if you don't see her taking actions for herself, actively reading a certain book, listening to something, actively taking care of her physical body, actively reaching out for support in like the professional world. If she's not taking action, I think kind of what you alluded to, Paul, like it's all going on in her head, and that trying to fix everything in her head is a no-end street for her. So no action on her part means that someone needs to take the frame, the action for her to have a chance at breathing again.
So the difficult part there is, if she needs to be saved, do we jump in the water? And if this is really, if she doesn't need to be saved at this point, then that would be controlling and inappropriate. And that's where it's difficult. And that's where we have to make a choice. I mean, if you saw her as, if she was one of your children or one of your parents or one of your family members where you weren't interested in any kind of intimacy, but hey, where's the point of, okay, like an intervention, a intervention for this person's health needs to happen. These are very difficult questions that, there's no perfect answer to. That's where we're starting to get. Now, if I circle back to something simple with the confrontational, this is always about you. I mean, I would say it's not all about me. And right now, what I'm talking about is us. And I so would love for you to join me in this conversation. Now, again, that's not going to magically fix it. But part of frame is knowing to your bones. So that's your question. Part of frame is knowing to your bones what you want, who you are, having compassion along the way, being in touch with your emotions, as we've talked about, but knowing you're heading in a certain direction. And if someone's just really not wanting to come along with you, it's sad. You have compassion for them. You do everything you can for them, show up and ask these questions, but you can't judge yourself on being able to save everyone. It's not a metric that we can affect that way. Yeah. Good stuff. Thanks, Paul. Appreciate it. Appreciate your work and coming back, man. Absolutely. Appreciate Cynthia being here. Have a good one. Bye, guys.